The sound of the scream was surgically precise, cutting through the low, ambient hum of billions of dollars changing hands. It wasn't the sound of panic, but of pure, distilled disgust, echoing off the polished Italian marble floor of Sterling and Cross's headquarters. "You absolute disgrace." Marcus Thorne, the chief operations manager for the entire North American division, stood rigid, his hand outstretched, pointing a finger that looked capable of slicing glass. He was perfection sculpted by finance, 32 years old, impossibly tanned even in midwinter Manhattan, clad in a charcoal bespoke suit that whispered 5 figures and smelling faintly of custom-blended cedar and cold, hard cash. His platinum Patek Philippe caught the harsh overhead light, flashing dangerously. The target of his venom was an elderly man named Arthur. Arthur was everything Marcus was not. He was stooped, slow, and smelled distinctly of sweat and industrial-strength lavender disinfectant. His uniform, a faded grey jumpsuit, was clean but threadbare, pulled tight across a frame that suggested a diet relying heavily on whatever carbohydrates were cheapest that week. He looked profoundly tired, the kind of exhaustion that seeped into the bones and never left, even after sleep. The reason for the public execution lay on the shining floor between them. A partially consumed, slightly soggy artisanal turkey sandwich garnished with arugula and goat cheese, carelessly discarded an hour earlier by a junior associate who had suddenly found himself called into an emergency trading meeting. The sandwich now lay next to a gleaming brass waste receptacle, the centerpiece of Arthur's transgression. Arthur had been caught, red-handed, fishing it out. "Are you deaf, Arthur?" Marcus's voice was low now, a lethal hiss, forcing the few analysts who dared to peek around the corner of the security desk to freeze. "I asked you a simple question. Were you eating from the trash?" Arthur kept his gaze fixed on the floor. He swallowed hard, a painful dry movement in his throat. His hands, gnarled and scarred by decades of manual labor, trembled slightly as he clutched a dirty microfiber cloth. "Sir," Arthur finally mumbled, his voice a brittle whisper, I just picked it up. It looked perfectly good. It hadn't even touched the bottom of the can." Marcus let out a theatrical gasp, a sound designed for the benefit of the surrounding observers. He took a deliberate, dramatic step back, as if the air Arthur breathed was toxic. "It looked good?" "Arthur, this is Sterling and Cross. We manage nearly $1 trillion in assets. We host heads of state and CEOs of Fortune 50 companies on this floor daily. Do you understand the image of immaculate, untouchable wealth we project here? And you, the lowest paid person on this entire 72-floor edifice, you are out here acting like a bottom-feeding scavenger." Marcus jabbed the air again. "That isn't just trash, Arthur. That is refuse. It is biohazard. It is a symbol of waste that we can afford, precisely because we ensure people like you stay outside the perimeter of our operation." Arthur's face flushed a deep, painful red. He wanted to disappear into the polished marble. He wasn't hungry just for himself. He had 3 pills of prescribed medication that required a baseline amount of calories to avoid painful stomach cramps, and the measly minimum wage check he took home barely covered rent and his wife's hospice care. That discarded sandwich represented nearly $20 he didn't have to spend on his own meager lunch of day-old bread. "I apologize, Mr. Thorne," Arthur tried again, his tone desperately pleading. "I truly am sorry. It won't happen again. I was just so famished, sir." Marcus scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest. His cufflinks, heavy obsidian set in white gold, gleamed. "Famished? That is not my problem, Arthur. Your personal inadequacies, your lack of planning, your inability to manage your caloric intake, none of that is the concern of Sterling and Cross." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a dangerous level of faux intimacy that was infinitely more terrifying than the previous screaming. The concern, Arthur, is that you fundamentally violate the pristine atmosphere we cultivate. Imagine if one of our major investors, Mr. Davies, or maybe the CEO himself, Mr. Sterling, were to step off that private elevator right now and see one of our staff, one of our representatives, literally eating garbage off the floor. Do you know what that says about us? Arthur shook his head numbly. It says, Marcus spat, that we are cheap, that we cut corners, that our staff are desperate and unstable. It suggests a lack of total control. And here at Sterling and Cross, Arthur, control is everything. Control is profit. You compromise the image, you compromise the stock price. Marcus gestured toward the discarded food with a shudder. Pick it up, get rid of the evidence, and then you report to Human Resources immediately. Your employment here is terminated. The world seemed to spin slowly for Arthur. Terminated. The word hit him like a physical blow, stealing the breath from his lungs. 58 years old, no marketable skills outside of cleaning and maintenance, living paycheck to paycheck, and now he was being dismissed just weeks before Christmas because he tried to eat a piece of unwanted, expensive bread. "Sir, please," Arthur begged, dropping the cleaning cloth and stepping closer. The marble floor was cold beneath his thin-soled shoes. "I have worked here for 5 years. I've never missed a shift. My wife, she's sick. If I lose this job, I lose her insurance. I lose everything. Can't you just give me a warning?" Marcus's lip curled into a look of absolute disdain, the kind reserved for something foul scraped off the bottom of a shoe. "A warning?" He actually laughed, a short, sharp bark that held no humor. "Arthur, you fundamentally misunderstand the gravity of this situation. This isn't a misplaced paperclip or a smudge on the glass. This is a moral failure, a hygiene violation, a policy breach so grotesque that I honestly question your sanity." He smoothed the lapel of his perfect jacket, regaining his composure as he addressed the invisible onlookers. "Company policy states explicitly, employees must maintain a standard of professionalism, hygiene, and conduct that reflects the premium image of Sterling and Cross. Digging through the refuse of our high-value clients and staff, appearing desperate and smelling like a low-rent laundry room, violates at least 3 key subsections of that policy. You are an immediate liability." Marcus pulled a crisp white envelope from his inside pocket, a pink slip, pristine and deadly. He didn't hand it to Arthur. He dropped it, letting it flutter down toward the janitor's worn shoes as if touching the man might contaminate him. "Consider this your final notice. Effective immediately, you are banned from the premises. Security will escort you out after you collect the few personal belongings I assume you have in that glorified broom closet you call an office." Arthur stared at the envelope. It was the end. The finality of it crushed the small hope he had held on to. He was now just another disposable piece of refuse, tossed out along with the turkey sandwich. He finally looked up, meeting Marcus's piercing blue eyes, eyes that held no flicker of pity, only cold, self-satisfied superiority. Arthur saw not a manager but a machine, programmed only for profit margins and perfect optics. "Mr. Thorne," Arthur said, his voice regaining a sudden, quiet strength that surprised even himself, "I hope one day you never understand what it means to be hungry." Marcus let out another short, mocking laugh, adjusting his tie. "I already understand hunger, Arthur. I was hungry for this corner office. Hungry for power, hungry for the kind of success that means I don't ever have to worry about where my next meal is coming from, or whether it was found in the garbage. That is the difference between us. I acted on my hunger. You merely wallow in yours." He pointed toward the service entrance. "Now, get out of my sight, and take your desperate poverty with you." Arthur bent slowly, retrieving the dreaded pink slip and the soggy turkey sandwich. He clutched both tightly, the evidence of his crime and its immediate punishment. He turned his back on the gleaming elevators, on the cold, hard marble, and on the arrogant young man who had just stolen his life raft, and began the long, humiliating walk toward the service corridor. The faint, sweet smell of the discarded goat cheese mingled nauseatingly with the sting of his public shame. He did not know that the name printed on the pink slip, Arthur J. Sterling, was not just the name of a janitor, but the name of the man who owned every piece of marble, every sheet of glass, and every share of Sterling and Cross. He was the CEO, deep undercover, and the humiliation he just endured was the first and most damning measurement of Marcus Thorne's true character. The polished wood of Marcus Thorne's desk felt cool and reassuring beneath his fingertips. He watched the service door click shut, swallowing the pathetic figure of the old janitor. A wave of clean, expensive air conditioning washed over him, scrubbing away the residual unpleasantness, the faint metallic odor of sweat, and the stale, yeasty smell of garbage. Marcus leaned back in his Italian leather chair, the kind that cost more than Arthur's annual salary, and exhaled slowly. A necessary cleanup. That was all it was. The janitorial staff at Sterling and Cross were little more than fungible commodities. They were an overhead that needed to be minimized, leveraged, and ultimately, if they became unsightly, replaced. He picked up his solid titanium fountain pen, twirling it casually between his fingers. He had secured this corner office, the view overlooking Manhattan glistening under the cold spring sun, not through sympathy or patience, but through absolute surgical ruthlessness. He hadn't clawed his way into this echelon of wealth to watch some derelict old man compromise the company's pristine image by feeding himself out of the waste bins. Marcus had always despised weakness. It was a philosophy honed during his ascent. He remembered the grueling years after business school, working 80-hour weeks while his colleagues were home relaxing. He had watched them falter, witnessed their marriages fail, or saw them take mental health breaks. He hadn't. He internalized a single, savage truth. Success belonged to those who eliminated everything soft and inefficient from their lives, and especially from their businesses. His ambition was a clean, sharp instrument. He had taken over the operations division 3 years prior, a department bloated with legacy employees and antiquated policies. In 6 months, he had slashed 30% of the non-essential staff, consolidated supplier contracts by intimidating vendors, and implemented a zero-tolerance policy for slackers. The casualties of his reign were many. There was Sarah in accounts, a single mother who had asked for flexible hours to manage her sick child. Marcus had simply replaced her with a younger, cheaper, and childless intern, citing unreliability. There was old Mr. Henderson, a security guard of 20 years, whom Marcus fired on the spot for nodding off during the late shift, denying him his hard-earned pension and justifying it as maintaining corporate integrity. Marcus didn't see people. He saw numbers. He saw profit margins. And Arthur the janitor was a negative number, a liability, an ugly smear on the immaculate ledger sheet. He pulled up the internal staff review system on his tablet. Marcus had only been observing Arthur J. Sterling, the new temporary night shift cleaner, for 2 weeks, but he had seen enough. The man moved too slowly. He smelled faintly of the cheap soap they provided in the staff bathrooms, and today he had committed the ultimate corporate sin, public self-degradation. "They're all the same," Marcus muttered to himself, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke Italian suit jacket. He had earned this life. He had started with an advantage, a college trust fund, a good name, and connections, but he had outworked everyone who had been handed the same silver spoon. The people like Arthur, who started with nothing, were lazy. They lacked the burning necessary hunger. They expected handouts and compassion, Two things Marcus had permanently excised from his professional vocabulary. He remembered a conversation with his mentor, the CEO he was desperately hoping to impress. "Compassion is a luxury, Marcus," the old man had told him during a particularly ruthless merger. "And this company doesn't deal in luxuries. It deals in necessities, power, money, and optics." Firing Arthur felt like polishing a dull spot on a perfect diamond. It was necessary maintenance. Meanwhile, in the harsh, poorly lit service corridor far below Marcus's gilded cage, Arthur J. Sterling leaned against a stack of discarded moving boxes, running a trembling hand through his greasy, thin hair. His disguise was painful. The CEO of Sterling and Cross, a man accustomed to private jets and tailor-made suits, was genuinely aching. The rough polyester uniform chafed against his skin. The cheap, worn boots he wore, part of the persona, had given him blisters that throbbed with every step. He was physically exhausted, not from the cleaning itself, but from the enforced slowness and the emotional toll of constant humiliation. His mission had been simple, yet brutally effective. Go completely dark for 1 month. Infiltrate the lower ranks of his own flagship corporation to find out why productivity was tanking despite stellar executive reports. He suspected middle management was creating a hostile, toxic environment. He needed undeniable proof. He needed a witness report that couldn't be dismissed as a disgruntled ex-employee's whine. He had started as a dishwasher at a subsidiary hotel, then moved to a fulfillment warehouse, and finally landed here as a temporary janitor, working the twilight shifts under Marcus Thorne. What he had witnessed was worse than he imagined. He watched Marcus systematically crush morale. He saw the way Marcus leveraged petty rules to enforce subservience. The cleaning crew was given a 15-minute unpaid lunch break, but they were often called back to deal with spills, effectively robbing them of their only rest. The drinking fountains on the executive floor were locked after 7 p.m., forcing the night crew to risk disciplinary action by sneaking expensive bottled water from conference rooms. And the wages. Arthur had calculated that the temporary laborers were paid nearly 40% less than the national average for the same job, while Marcus's quarterly bonus, which was tied to efficiency and cost reduction, was skyrocketing. The whole encounter with the turkey sandwich had been the final critical test. Arthur hadn't truly been starving. He kept a $50 bill hidden in the sole of his boot, enough for a week of meals. But he had been genuinely hungry, and the sight of the perfectly good discarded food had stirred something profound in him. He had deliberately played the role of the desperate, broken man, hoping that when confronted with the rawest form of human need, Marcus Thorne would show even a sliver of empathy. Maybe offer him $1 for a proper meal, maybe just look away and ignore the violation. Instead, Marcus had weaponized it. He had used the act of eating from the trash as a surgical tool to dissect Arthur's dignity, stripping him down to nothing and then tossing him out. Arthur looked down at the pink slip in his hand. The paper felt like a certificate of disgrace. He thought of his real office, 30 floors above, where the temperature was always perfect and the scent of leather and old money lingered in the air. He thought of his board meetings, where people debated millions with careful, quiet decorum. Now he stood amid the smell of bleach and overflowing cardboard, his back aching, his heart filled with the righteous, cold fury he hadn't felt since he wrestled control of the company from his inept cousins 3 decades ago. He wasn't just fired. He was publicly, brutally rejected by a manager who embodied everything Arthur J. Sterling had spent his life trying to eliminate from corporate culture: greed, untempered by conscience. Arthur slowly pulled out a worn, inexpensive Nokia phone, another intentional piece of the disguise. He needed to make a call, not to a lawyer, not yet. He needed to secure the next step of his mission. He had the proof he needed, but he wasn't done being Arthur the janitor. He needed to push Marcus one last time to see just how low the man would sink. He carefully tucked the pink slip and the soggy, incriminating sandwich into his breast pocket. The humiliation was not the end of the story. It was merely the necessary prelude to the reckoning. He began the long, painful walk out of the service entrance, exiting his own building not as its owner, but as its refuse. He walked past the delivery bay, where a new shipment of executive furniture, soft leather and polished chrome, was being unloaded. Each box was stenciled with the company's logo, S&C. Marcus Thorne, back in his luxurious office, poured himself a glass of water from a crystal carafe, perfectly satisfied. He had just saved the company a few $100s in minimum wage and maintained the optics of the executive floor. He glanced at his phone, noting the time. He was already drafting the email to HR, attaching Arthur's name and the vague, damning reason: gross misconduct and failure to maintain corporate standards. He felt a familiar, smug sense of power. He controlled the flow of money, the flow of information, and the flow of humanity beneath him. And tomorrow, he would propose a new strategy to the board, further cutting temporary labor hours to boost the quarterly bonus. He had no idea that the failure to maintain corporate standards, he reported, was about to cost him everything he had spent his life fighting for. He was still convinced that the old man he fired was just a piece of trash. He was about to find out that he had just attempted to throw away the diamond standard. Arthur J. Sterling, despite the stinging humiliation and the clear instructions to vacate the property immediately, did not leave the S&C tower. He simply couldn't. Not yet. The mission was only half complete, and the man who called himself Marcus Thorne had passed the character test with a failing grade. But Arthur needed Marcus to double down, to confirm that his cruelty ran deeper than mere policy adherence. Arthur shuffled his feet near the entrance of the executive lift, the polished chrome reflecting his weary, ill-fitting uniform. The air conditioning in the corridor, calibrated to keep expensive suits from wrinkling, cut straight through the thin fabric of his shirt, leaving him chilled to the bone. He felt the phantom pain of hunger again, a dull ache that reminded him of the sacrifice he was making to truly understand the soul of his own company. He pulled the crumpled pink slip out of his pocket and sighed, the sound barely audible over the hum of the ventilation system. He had secured the evidence of Marcus's lack of compassion. Now he needed evidence of Marcus's malice. Ignoring the pain in his knees, Arthur turned and walked slowly back toward the direction of Marcus's corner office. He needed a plausible, pathetic reason to re-engage, to push the man's tolerance past the breaking point. He needed one last, small act of mercy to be denied. He rapped his knuckles lightly on the heavy oak door. There was no immediate answer, only the sound of muted conversation and the clink of glass. Arthur knocked again, slightly louder this time. The door flew open with unnecessary force, revealing Marcus Thorne, whose face instantly tightened into a mask of aggressive impatience. He was holding a slender crystal tumbler, half filled with ice and water, condensation dripping onto the Persian rug. "What in the hell are you doing back here, Arthur?" Marcus hissed, his voice low but saturated with menace. "I explicitly told you to leave. Trespassing is a serious offense, and I've already filed the report with HR. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling security and having them remove you by force." Arthur hunched his shoulders, adopting the posture of a beaten dog. His eyes, usually sharp and penetrating, were clouded with feigned defeat. "Mr. Thorne, please, sir," Arthur pleaded, his voice raspy. "I'm terribly sorry, it was a mistake, but I left my water bottle under the desk near the shredder. It's an old plastic thing, but I need it. It's the only one I have." Marcus looked down at the old man, then back at the expensive tumbler in his hand, a small, arrogant smirk playing on his lips. The sheer indignity of the request amused him. This pathetic old man, whose existence he had just erased with a flourish of the pen, was worried about a cheap piece of plastic. "A water bottle," Marcus repeated, drawing out the words like they were filth. He didn't step aside. He used his body, clad in $4,000 Italian wool, to block the doorway completely. "You were just fired for gross misconduct, Arthur. You violated health regulations and severely damaged the corporate optics of this entire floor. And you think I'm going to let you back in to retrieve some germ-ridden plastic container? It just holds tap water, sir," Arthur tried, lifting his hands in a gesture of sincere begging. "I promise I won't take a minute. I need to take my medication tonight, and I can't drink the water from the fountains. They hurt my teeth, sir." Marcus scoffed, taking a long, slow sip of his own icy water, watching Arthur's dry lips as he did so. "That sounds like a personal problem, Arthur," he said coolly, wiping the corner of his mouth with a crisp linen napkin. "And S&C is not in the business of managing personal problems. We are in the business of maintaining image and maximizing profit. You know what your problem is, Arthur? You lack professionalism." He waved his free hand dismissively. "You are focused on a 79-cent water bottle while I'm focused on quarterly projections. That..." Marcus leaned in conspiratorially, his expensive cologne momentarily assaulting Arthur's senses, "is the difference between management and minimum wage labor. Now move along." Arthur felt the internal rage beginning to boil, but he kept his face utterly blank. He had traveled the world, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and addressed the UN General Assembly. Now, he was being denied a basic human need, water, by a man who saw him only as an unfortunate stain on the corporate ledger. Arthur tried one last tack, the ultimate test of empathy. "Mr. Thorne," he said softly, his voice trembling convincingly, "I feel very weak. I haven't eaten properly all day. I know I was wrong to eat the sandwich, but could I just, perhaps, stand here in the corridor for 5 minutes? Just to catch my breath? I feel faint." This was the moment. The opportunity for Marcus to show one shred of decency, to remember the universal contract of humanity, the knowledge that all people, regardless of income, deserve a minute of rest and a drop of water. Marcus didn't hesitate. His eyes narrowed, not with pity, but with suspicion. "Faint, are we?" Marcus sneered. "Trying to play the medical card now? I know exactly what this is, Arthur. You are attempting to loiter on company property after being terminated to force some kind of legal leverage. You think if you collapse here, we'll be liable for your medical bills." He pushed the door slightly wider, enough to reveal the opulent interior of his office. The high-backed leather chair, the expansive mahogany desk that had cost more than Arthur's annual salary, and the large panoramic window overlooking the financial district, a world Marcus believed he had earned the right to gaze down upon. "Let me be clear, Arthur," Marcus stated, dropping his voice to a dangerous octave. "If you faint, I will call the police, not an ambulance. You are a liability. You are a risk, and you are a visual deterrent to the kind of high-level business we conduct here. Every minute you stand here, you are polluting the air of success." He pointed sharply toward the elevators. "Leave now, and if I ever see you near this building again, I will have the maximum charges pressed against you for harassment and trespassing." The complete lack of soul chilled Arthur more than the air conditioning. Marcus saw human suffering not as a tragedy, but as a potential line item on a lawsuit. He was the very definition of the ruthless, metrics-driven manager Arthur had dedicated his life to fighting. Arthur nodded slowly, lowering his head in apparent defeat. "Yes, sir, I understand, sir." He turned, taking 2 steps toward the elevators, then abruptly stopped. He slowly turned back, his face a mask of carefully constructed terror. "Wait, Mr. Thorne," Arthur stammered, raising a shaky hand toward the desk. "I just remembered. I left my work gloves next to your paperweight, sir. They have my house key sewn into the cuff. Please, I need the key to get inside my apartment." Marcus was already closing the door, his patience extinguished. The janitor was dragging this out, insulting his intelligence. "I am not searching your trash for you, Arthur. Anything you left behind is considered abandoned property and will be disposed of. Good day." Marcus began to shut the heavy door, but Arthur wedged his worn, rubber-soled boot into the gap, leveraging his slight weight against the frame. "Sir, please, just a glance. They are right next to the crystal." Before Arthur could finish, Marcus shoved the door hard. Arthur stumbled back, catching himself just before he hit the marble wall. Marcus, infuriated by the physical resistance, stepped out of the office and into the corridor, his face flushed with adrenaline and arrogance. "That is enough. You are attempting to force entry. This is physical obstruction of the workplace," Marcus yelled, loud enough that a young intern down the hall peeked out of an office, then quickly retreated. Marcus straightened his tie, breathing heavily. He looked down at Arthur, who was still clutching the wall for balance. This old man was making a scene, staining the pristine hallway with his desperation. Marcus needed to escalate. He needed to make Arthur's exit so painful and complete that he would never dare return or attempt to file any claim. He needed a charge stronger than eating trash. Marcus took a step closer, his eyes scanning the area around the desk he had just exited. His gaze fell upon a small antique silver letter opener, a priceless family heirloom gifted by his grandfather, kept purely for show. This was it, the perfect, irreversible mistake. In a quick, fluid motion fueled by spite, Marcus grabbed the letter opener from the desk and slipped it into the breast pocket of his own suit jacket, just enough for the silver handle to be concealed by the flap. Then he pointed a shaking, accusatory finger directly at Arthur, his voice rising to a full, theatrical shout designed to attract attention. "Security! Security!" Marcus shrieked, pressing the speed dial button for building security on his cell phone with his thumb. "Get up here immediately! We have a criminal trespasser. He was just fired, and he attempted to break back into my office." Arthur stared up at him, the feigned look of fear hardening into something cold and terrifying, though Marcus was too blinded by his own rage and sense of power to notice. "And listen carefully, Arthur," Marcus growled into the phone, his eyes still locked on the janitor. "I know you tried to steal something. I just had the suspicion you were trying to grab my grandfather's antique silver letter opener. I saw you looking at it moments ago. It's gone. You were fired for gross misconduct, and now you're going to jail for theft." Marcus hung up the phone with a decisive snap, breathing heavily. He stood over Arthur, hands planted on his hips, his expensive leather shoes gleaming on the marble floor. "You won't just get a pink slip now, Arthur," Marcus sneered, triumphant. "You'll get handcuffs. Enjoy sleeping on a cot tonight because you just tried to steal from the wrong executive." Arthur, the supposed janitor, merely tilted his head back, looking directly into the manager's cruel, victorious eyes. Arthur J. Sterling knew now that there was no bottom to this man's depravity. The test was over. The trap had been sprung, and Marcus had willingly leaped into it. All that remained was the reckoning. Arthur J. Sterling, known moments ago only as the disposable janitor Arthur, tilted his head back, watching the executive stand over him, chest puffed out in a predatory display of triumph. Marcus looked like a snake that had just swallowed a whole rabbit, sated, arrogant, and entirely convinced of his own untouchable power. "I tried to warn you, Arthur," Marcus hissed, bending slightly at the waist so his voice wouldn't carry too far into the hallway, though the damage was already done. "You people never listen. You think the rules don't apply to you. You think you can steal my grandfather's irreplaceable silver heirlooms and just walk out the door. This isn't some cheap convenience store." Arthur did not speak. He didn't flinch, didn't stammer a denial, and certainly didn't beg. The exhaustion that had been painstakingly faked over the last 3 days seemed to evaporate from his frame, replaced by a terrible stillness. His eyes, usually softened by the disguise of age and fatigue, were now razor-sharp, calculating. It was this unnerving silence that finally began to prickle Marcus's skin, eroding the edges of his victory. The old man wasn't responding the way a man facing jail time should. Where was the frantic pleading? Where was the sweat? The heavy thud, thud, thud of approaching footsteps echoed off the polished marble hallway, announcing the arrival of the security detail. 2 men, Ben and Gary, huge former NYPD officers now working high-end corporate security, rounded the corner, their faces impassive but serious. They stopped short when they saw the scene, the immaculately dressed VP Marcus Thorne standing over the disheveled, defeated-looking janitor who sat on the cold floor. "Mr. Thorne, what's the situation?" Ben asked, his hand instinctively going to the heavy black radio holstered on his belt. Marcus immediately snapped back into his role as the wronged victim, the professional victim of the lower class. He straightened his tie and adjusted the flawless cuff of his custom Italian suit. "This man, Arthur, was just terminated for gross negligence and misconduct," Marcus explained, his voice laced with righteous indignation. "He refused to leave the premises. Then he attempted to break back into my private office and steal personal property. Priceless family property, gentlemen." He pointed to Arthur, who remained seated looking utterly unremarkable, a stain on the otherwise perfect floor plan. "He tried to steal my grandfather's antique silver letter opener. It was on my desk moments ago, and now it's gone. You need to restrain him and contact the precinct. We are pressing charges. I want him booked immediately." Ben and Gary exchanged a quick glance. Security didn't usually handle theft, especially not a small, non-corporate item like a letter opener. But an executive's word was law. They moved towards Arthur, their presence alone filling the already cramped hallway. "Sir, you need to stand up and come with us," Gary stated, his tone firm, non-negotiable. Arthur slowly began to rise. The movement was deliberate, no longer the clumsy shuffle of an overworked servant, but the measured movement of a predator preparing to strike. He didn't look at the guards. His eyes remained fixed on Marcus, the man who had just risked a felony conviction and a lifetime of professional ruin purely to avoid paying a few $100s in severance. "Do it, Arthur," Marcus taunted, leaning in close as the security guards took hold of Arthur's elbows. "Let's see if your next employer pays you in cigarettes." Just as Ben began to pull Arthur away, the air changed. It wasn't a sound or a light. It was a cessation of noise. All the usual high-frequency background buzz of the floor, the muffled ringing phones, the click of keyboards, the low hum of the HVAC system vanished. Marcus barely noticed, too focused on the satisfying sight of the janitor being hauled away. Then Arthur's cell phone, a cheap, cracked model that Marcus had noticed earlier and dismissed as standard low-wage tech, began to vibrate in the breast pocket of his threadbare brown jumpsuit. It was loud and insistent, playing a ringtone Marcus dimly recognized, the theme from The Godfather. Arthur reached into the pocket, his movement suddenly too smooth, too confident for a man about to be arrested. He lifted the phone to his ear. "Yes, it's me," Arthur said. His voice was low, resonant, and completely different from the squeaky, subservient tone Marcus had grown used to. It was the voice of command. Marcus frowned. "I told you, no personal calls on company time, especially when you're being escorted out for felony theft. Hang up that phone." Arthur ignored him completely, continuing his conversation. "No, I won't need the police, Richard. Not yet. The situation is under control, but I need you to do 2 things for me immediately," Marcus scoffed, turning to the security guards. "Ignore him. Take him down to the lobby." But Ben and Gary weren't moving. Something about the way the janitor spoke, the unhurried authority that radiated from him, had frozen them in place. They were high-level corporate security. They recognized that tone. That wasn't the voice of someone worried about a cot in a jail cell. Arthur continued, pacing slowly, his back now to Marcus. "First, I need you to contact the chief financial officer. Tell her to immediately freeze all personal assets and benefits tied to the employment contract of Vice President Marcus Thorne. He is to be locked out of all accounts, effective immediately." Marcus froze. He felt a bead of cold sweat trace a path down his neck beneath his perfectly starched collar. VP, Marcus Thorne. How did this miserable janitor know his full name and title? "Second," Arthur continued, his voice dropping to a gravelly register that made the security guards visibly flinch, "I need you to call the chauffeur. Tell him to bring the Bentley sedan, not the company Escalade, to the executive entrance. And tell him to hurry. I don't like standing around in these clothes." Arthur lowered the phone from his ear and paused the conversation. He turned slowly, deliberately, towards Marcus. The transformation was chilling. The slump was gone. The fake grime on the jumpsuit suddenly seemed less like filth and more like a costume. The eyes that met Marcus's were no longer dull or defeated. They burned with the cold, hard fury of a man who was used to signing checks worth more than Marcus's entire yearly bonus. Marcus felt the panic rising in his throat like bile. Who are you talking to?" he stammered. "This is highly irregular. You are impersonating an executive." Arthur smiled, a slow, cold crescent that did not reach his eyes. "Irregular? Marcus, the only thing irregular here is your pathetic attempt at a frame job." He placed the phone back against his ear. "Richard, one more thing. I need you to call the building manager of this entire complex. Inform him that the janitorial service contract with Allied Waste Management is immediately terminated due to unacceptable safety and hygiene violations. Tell him to have their equipment off the property within the hour. Send all their employees home with a 2-week severance package paid by Sterling Global, regardless of their contract status." Marcus took an involuntary step back, bumping into the wall. Sterling Global. The name hit him like a physical blow. He worked for Sterling Global. Arthur J. Sterling wasn't just an owner, he was the owner. The mythical, rarely seen founder and CEO. The billionaire architect of the entire corporation. A man known for his brutal efficiency and even more brutal sense of justice. Marcus's lips moved, but no sound came out. The blood drained from his face, leaving his expensive skin the color of printer paper. Arthur disconnected the call and dropped the cheap, cracked phone carelessly into the pocket of his filthy overalls. The sound of the plastic shell hitting the fabric was deafening in the sudden silence. He then looked at Ben and Gary, the security guards, who were now standing ramrod straight, their hands clasped in front of them, terrified. "Gentlemen," Arthur said, his tone perfectly polite, the tone of a CEO addressing employees he respects. "I apologize for the confusion. Please escort Vice President Thorne to my office. We need to discuss his recent performance evaluation." Marcus shook his head violently, desperately, the shock having given way to a paralyzing terror. No, you're not Arthur Sterling. You can't be. He's 70. He's in Europe. He's on the board. This is a trick." Arthur reached up slowly and began to peel the sweat-soaked cheap wig he was wearing away from his scalp. Underneath, his hair was thick, perfectly cut and silver gray, framing a face that, while undeniably aged, was sharp, strong, and instantly recognizable from the company's internal annual report cover. "My passport says Arthur J. Sterling Marcus," the CEO confirmed, his voice now entirely devoid of the meekness he had carefully crafted over 3 days. "As for Europe, I tend to travel undercover when I want the unvarnished truth about my company's operations. The board demands transparency, you see." He straightened his posture fully. The jumpsuit, moments before a symbol of poverty, now looked like a deliberate costume. Arthur J. Sterling stood perhaps 3 inches taller than the tired janitor, projecting an aura of immense quiet wealth. Marcus was now openly shaking. "Sir, Mr. Sterling, I didn't recognize you. I swear I thought you were just some contractor." A contractor who had the audacity to seek sustenance from a waste receptacle after you denied him his contractual lunch break, Arthur countered smoothly, taking a slow step toward the trapped executive. "And who had the audacity to drink water from the employee fountain because you considered providing cups an unnecessary overhead expenditure?" "I remember every detail, Marcus." Marcus began to sweat profusely, his expensive, bespoke suit suddenly feeling like a lead jacket. He looked wildly at Ben and Gary, who stared back with blank expressions, loyal only to the highest authority. But the theft, sir! He tried to steal your letter opener. It was a serious threat. I was protecting company assets, sir," Marcus cried, desperately trying to cling to the lie he had built just minutes ago. Arthur stopped directly in front of Marcus. He reached out a hand, not to grab, but to point precisely at Marcus's left breast pocket, where the silk flap of the jacket concealed the top of the silver handle. "Ah, yes," Arthur murmured, his eyes locking onto Marcus's. "The letter opener, the priceless family heirloom given to me by my grandfather, Sterling Sr. It is indeed a one-of-a-kind piece." Marcus's entire body went rigid. His eyes darted to his own pocket, confirming the fatal blunder. In his rush to frame the janitor, he had forgotten the simple rule. If you're going to frame someone for theft, make sure the stolen item isn't on your person. I don't know what you mean, sir," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking horribly. He tried to subtly press his arm against his chest, hoping to conceal the bulge. Arthur leaned in, his silver hair immaculate, his newly revealed face radiating cold contempt. "It's gone," you said. "Stolen by the low-life trash janitor." Arthur paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. "Then, Marcus," he asked, his voice low, measured, and infinitely dangerous, "could you explain to my security detail why my priceless stolen family heirloom is currently residing in the breast pocket of your $5,000 suit?" Marcus's composure finally shattered. The facade of ruthless executive efficiency collapsed, replaced by the terrified desperation of a small, mean man caught in his own web. "It was a mistake, a momentary lapse. I was stressed. I was going to put it back. I thought if he was going to steal, I needed proof," Marcus babbled, trying to pull the letter opener out of his pocket to discard the evidence. But his fingers were too clumsy, too wet with nervous sweat, to grasp the silver handle. "Lies built upon cruelty, Marcus," Arthur said flatly, stepping back, the distance emphasizing the gulf between them. "I didn't just see you fire a man for eating a half-eaten sandwich from the trash. I saw you refuse him water. I saw you deny him 5 minutes of rest. I saw you humiliate him publicly because you found his scent offensive. And then, when given the opportunity to show a shred of humanity, you chose to frame him for a felony and try to send him to prison." Arthur turned to Ben and Gary. "Gentlemen, you saw the situation. You heard his admission just now. Mr. Thorne is relieved of his duties, effective this instant, for gross corporate malfeasance, attempted criminal battery, theft, and lying to senior management." He looked back at Marcus, who was now weeping openly, tears carving clean paths down his dirty cheeks. "You won't just get a pink slip, Marcus. You just tried to steal from the wrong executive, and you tried to frame an innocent man for it. And I don't believe in second chances for people who believe others deserve 0 chances." Arthur then delivered the final devastating blow, his voice ringing with absolute unyielding authority. Escort Mr. Thorne out of the building. Have legal file a motion for immediate recovery of all company property, including his laptop, company car, and the severance package he won't be needing. And make sure the local precinct is fully informed about this attempted framing. Tell them that Sterling Global is pressing charges for filing a false police report and attempted theft. Marcus screamed, a desperate, raw sound of total ruin. "Sir, Mr. Sterling, please, my family, my career. I have a mortgage, I swear. I'll take a pay cut. I'll work the janitorial service myself. Just don't do this." Arthur, the CEO, merely looked down at the disgraced executive who had just tried to ruin his undercover alter ego's life. "When I was on the floor, Marcus, living paycheck to paycheck and smelling like sweat," Arthur said, his voice quiet now, lethal in its control. "I had a mortgage too. I also asked for mercy. You denied it. Karma, Marcus, isn't just a concept for the poor. Sometimes it wears a silver-grey suit and arrives in a Bentley. And tell the chauffeur to have the car ready," Arthur added to the guards, adjusting his coat. "I smell like trash and I need a shower.